Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. I interview incredible people who've dedicated their lives to helping those who've been impacted by trauma. A big thank you to our sponsors and our guests who are supporting this show. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I'm very excited to have as my guest today, Michelle Smith. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Guy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So Michelle has over 10 years of experience supporting individuals through trauma, grief, life transitions, anxiety, among other issues. Trained in EMDR, DBT, IFS, Gottman couples therapy, and more, she offers a holistic, client-centered approach that integrates mind-body practices with evidence-based care. She provides a compassionate, non-judgmental space for clients of all backgrounds to heal, grow, and reach their goals. All right, Michelle. A little bit about you, but before we get going, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
So originally I'm from Edmond, Oklahoma. I was born outside of Washington, D.C., Alexandria, but spent most of my time growing up in this area. Went to Florida to get my master's for a while, came back, had a family, so I'm back here, kind of went around the block a little bit, but I am currently located in Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Okay. So let's dive in here. How the heck does this passion start for you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It started, I would say, my first psychology class, to be honest with you, Guy. I started learning about the brain, and I feel like I was always curious about why do people do the things they do? Why did they respond the way they respond? And my first psychology class, I remember taking it in high school, and I felt like a whole world was unlocked where I had to know more. I had to figure out how can I get into this? How can I support people who are also curious about this? So really started very early for me and continued to grow from there. Yeah.
All right. So you do that in high school. You obviously go to college,
Yeah.
and what are you thinking? Okay, this is it. I'm going to become a therapist, or what?
I think I always wanted to be a therapist. I don't think I ever wavered from that, but I would say, my experience as I went to master's school was very impactful for me personally. My father was under cancer. He was very sick during this time, and actually was one of the reasons why I moved to Florida to be close to him. During my master's program, he had passed away. I had just gotten married. I was understanding grief and life challenges and trauma in real time in my personal life while I'm trying to understand how to learn how to support others going through that, and
No.
observing that, and understanding that from a personal lens, I think was incredibly impactful for me, and doubled down my need to understand connection, understand why we need others to heal. And so for me, that was incredibly impactful and created a lot of meaning around why I do what I do and how I can sit across clients in those spaces, of course, as a human.
It's obviously, as we all know, one thing to learn something in the pages of a book, and another thing, entirely to go through it. What was that experience like for you? I mean, what was that process like for you? I mean, having to deal with your father and then studying that, and then there's also the process of working with others. How we absorb that. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I learned very quickly the depths of suffering and pain that people can be in, and to really build a quick empathy to that. Like you said, it can be one thing learning this in a book, but when you experience this, you really understand, wow, how vulnerable that is for somebody to even want to come sit across from me and share their story and be within that emotion. That is incredibly brave, incredibly courageous. And it taught me how privileged this job is to do what I do. It also challenged me to build healthy boundaries and self care and ways to be able to do this work very quickly. I remember realizing that this is important not only to take care of myself, but to be the best version of myself that I can be as I sit across clients. And so, what does that mean for my life outside? How do I spend time with my grief? How do I spend time with my work, my education, myself? What do I need to be able to process those emotions? And during that time, I became very close to yoga and meditation. I started exploring different pathways of spirituality and things that were important for me, the meaning created in that loss. What does that mean? How do I carry on on my father's legacy through the work that I do, that was very important for me. So it challenged me to really figure that out quickly, quicker than maybe I would have wanted to be honest, Guy. But I'm grateful
Hmm.
for it as I look back on this experience and how it got me here, right?
For me, and I'm interested to hear your thought on this. I mean, going through an experience like that with your father, mm, a lot of people handle it differently. There are those of us who feel kind of, I don't want to say comfortable, but we can quote unquote, we can be in that moment. We can be in that fire in a sense. And for others, it's like, nope, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to get in that fire
Yeah.
and deal with it that way. Where did you find yourself in that, along that continuum?
I think it was very circumstantial. So there were times where I felt like I had the capacity to be with that emotion and I was able to utilize my resources. And then there was times where I remember feeling incredibly flooded and running out of class and crying and being wondering, will I ever be able to be strong enough to support people through this if I myself am not strong enough to manage the ebbs and the flows of my own life. And so it was very moment by moment at first, and I really had to hone in on my own therapy, my own resources, understanding how I can make it through this and utilize this as an opportunity to create meaning in the work that I do. So, um, to answer your question, it was up and down.
Yeah, of course. So, well, let's talk about that. I mean,
Yeah.
when you say use this opportunity to create meaning, what are you saying there? Talk more about
Yeah.
that.
So I remember, being in graduate school, one of the first things that we learned is we read Man's Search for Meaning. And that's this book by Viktor Frankl, who was this incredible psychologist who was spent time in Auschwitz. And he talked about how you always have a choice to perceive and to recognize how you want to look at things and how you want to think and how you want to behave. And so that was pivotal for me to think about my grief journey in that way. My father was somebody who really taught me to love and understand people's stories. He was somebody
Mm,
in the aviation world, but became a big leader and would give time of day to anybody who crossed the street. He wanted to know their story. He wanted to learn more about them. And that was such a beautiful thing that I always admired about him. And that's what honestly made me interested in understanding the brain, to be honest, Guy. And so I wanted to know, how can I carry that legacy with me? How can I transform this grief into meaning, because we know that that is a part of the healing process with grief. We know that eventually we want to carry on the best parts of the people that we've lost. And so that was a question for me. I don't know if I knew it at the moment. I think I was curious about it, and eventually it continued to grow, but for me that kind of was an anchor. That was an anchor through it, is that eventually I will be able to carry this legacy on, and I want to do that every moment I sit down with clients, every moment I do something that's intentional with my job, right?
you want to what? Understand the meaning of the situation, or what? When you
I
say I
wanna
want
carry
does.
on. I think I wanted to carry on an empathy, a connection, a value to people's stories. That for me was the meaning, is that every story has value, even when
Yeah.
we feel like we have shame attached to it, or we feel like there's negative emotions or difficult things to process. There we can learn from those stories. So I wanted my clients to feel that hopefulness, that maybe
Mm.
something positive or maybe something meaningful can come from the story. Maybe your experience felt super icky, but you can look back and say it created this meaning for me. And so I think that's what I meant, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm. Okay. Let me remind everyone, I'm speaking with Michelle Smith. So, what does that look like when you're working with someone? How
Yeah.
do you work with that? How do you interject that into the relationship?
So it's really a sense of presence, building a sense of presence, and doing the work outside of my sessions so that I can be fully present with my clients. I think a lot of the work that we do is sitting across from folks, but it's also every single moment outside of that, right? How am I getting myself to the place where I can really listen and be curious and understand what does that mean to them, right? Being able to approach things from a non-judgmental standpoint and expand my education of different cultural sensitivities and backgrounds, and really recognize also the similarities that we all have as humans more so. I mean, that's another reason why I got into this work, because I truly believe that humans, we have so much in common. Of course, we have differences, but we have these experiences of pain and meaning and loss and love and connection. And how can we hone in on that? Right. So that's something that
Mhm.
I'm always considering as I'm sitting across from a client. How can I bridge this gap of humanity between us?
When you first started out, were you, you seem to have a very kind of inspired and inspiring palette of emotions and feelings from which you draw when you're working with your clients. Was that always present, or did that grow and evolve as you've gotten been in this field?
I think it may have been present, but I had to do the work to be willing to grow it and evolve it over time, right? So I had to look at that, and I had to be willing to work through maybe any shame or old belief systems or peel back layers that may have told me that that doesn't have value, right? We have so much that society tells us vulnerability is weakness, and how much is fair to share, especially as a therapist, right? Being vulnerable, what does that look like, while also aligning with my ethics and things like that. So I really had to challenge that, and I had to think about, who do I want to be, what type of practice do I want to show up at, what would I want from that therapeutic dynamic, and challenge that. And so I had to break down a lot of barriers to get there, and be brave enough to do that type of work as well, right?
Well, you just opened up an amazing question here. So, how do you answer that question? What kind of therapist do you want to be?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you want to show up? And to what degree are you sharing your vulnerability or being vulnerable within therapy?
Yeah. I think the most important thing is I want my clients to feel safety, and as we know with trauma, we really struggle with feeling an internal sense of safety, right? Sometimes we don't even know what feels safe, or what's the difference between safety and survival. And so part of that is modeling that for my clients and showing up with an essence and a presence of safety, and being able to mirror that and being able to support them, right? And so part of that work is being understanding about what creates safety for me, and how can I show up and create an environment of safety for my clients, creating a sense of belonging, a connection where maybe they haven't had a safe one in a really long time, right?
So, how to get specific? How does one create a safe environment for them? What do you do?
Yeah. So I think when it starts in the therapeutic process, I want to really once again, hear someone's story. I want to understand, where are you coming from? What lenses are you looking at the world through, without its lens of judgment, right? Putting my own biases, putting my own experiences aside, and really challenging those with my own therapeutic work, and making sure that I'm staying open and present. So I'm hearing your story, I'm understanding. We're creating treatment goals, right? We're collaborating on this. We're talking about, okay, what if you could, feel the sense of healed, if you could feel connected, what would that be like, right? Let's talk about that. And then we're making treatment plans together, and we're making sure, and I'm checking in, right? And I'm saying, how are things going? Is this helpful? Is this not helpful? I'm checking my own self. I'm opening a collaborative relationship with a client to say, hey, if something doesn't stick with you, or if it feels icky, you tell me that, right? This is a
Hmm.
relationship where I want to create safety, where you may have never been able to do that in your family system, or
Mm.
you've never been able to challenge somebody and say, you know what, Michelle, this doesn't seem like it's working, so let's move, let's pivot. And I welcome that. I talk about that a lot, right? I'm calling that out. I'm noticing, oh, you responded this way. Does that mean something, right? So I'm really trying to build this constant awareness of my clients in every moment and every second in their sessions and beyond, right? And communication beyond. And I think that that builds trust, that builds a sense of safety,
Yeah.
and hopefully over time that opens up a sense of vulnerability for their stories to be heard.
When you first started doing this, when you first started working with individuals who maybe had experienced, trauma, interpersonal trauma more specifically, what was that like for you?
It's it's difficult because, of course, you can't take yourself out of your experience with the work that we do, right? We're always going to be a human. And this idea of like leaving yourself at the door, I think is a little unrealistic as a human, as a therapist. And honestly, people want humanity in their therapies,
Right.
right? So I'm also recognizing that and thinking that, if you want to talk to a robot, you could, but you're not. You're here with me, right? So what level of honesty and integrity and vulnerability can I bring to you and understand and share what self-disclosure is appropriate, when is it not appropriate, right? And so also finding avenues to share my story, I think, that are outside of my therapeutic work, like this itself is very valuable because I can share these resources with my current clients and I can let them in to different parts of my inner world so that they don't feel so alone. I think it can feel so one-sided with a therapeutic relationship where they're spilling their guts and then I'm not even telling you anything about myself.
Hmm.
So if you are curious about that, here's all this avenue to understand me as a human, because that also matters. You want to believe me and understand me as a human as well as a therapist, right? A lot of people do, at least.
Right. And that, I guess there was a time and a place for that one-sidedness, right? With
Yeah.
psychoanalysis. I mean, that certainly was present for a long time.
Yeah.
People still practice that, but how did you learn the importance of being vulnerable
Yeah.
within the therapeutic relationship? Were there moments or experiences you had where like, oh my God, you know,
Yeah.
this, I can share this, but not that.
Yeah. In my early work, I did a lot of community mental health. So I worked in like high schools with at-risk youth or like teen treatment centers, things like that. And I especially found with that population, the realness, the genuineness created this bridge of connection, right? So if I sometimes the self-disclosure, like for example, I remember a girl that I worked in an at-risk youth. I did groups all the time. So that was like my first job is I would just do group after group, 7, 8 groups a day,
Oh
and
my
being able
God.
to understand those group dynamics. And maybe I remember there was one student that really struggled with the group. So I'd pull them aside and I'd say, hey, what's going on here? Right? Like, what are you struggling? And they actually had a death in their family. And I was able to that was one of the first times I self disclosed about my father and my loss. And
Mm,
after that relationship with that particular group participant was amazing. She started showing up. She wanted to participate. She's like, "Can I come to
hmm.
group 2 times a day, Miss Michelle?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." So, it's sometimes you have to give a little vulnerability for someone else to give back and create this ping
Right.
pong effect.
Right.
And I think I learned that through that experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Several months ago, when I was ready to get back into therapy, I had moved and I called the therapist I'd been working with in California, and I emailed her, and she said she was no longer seeing clients, and I was like, oh my God! But she could recommend some. She recommended 3 other people.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I'll check these people out. So I did, and the first person, and they were all competent, I'm sure. But the first person I contacted, I emailed, and we ended up having a video chat. And she spent like 15 minutes telling me like what modality she was going to use and what intervention. I was like, I don't care. I
Yeah.
want a friggin' human being.
Yeah.
You know, I want a human being. And I think there's oftentimes a tendency for therapists to feel like they're walking on eggshells. I can't share this. Oh my God, am I going to do? And what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel that, first of all, do you agree with that? Do you think that's changing? Do you feel people or the therapist landscape now is shifting? What are your thoughts?
I totally see that shifting, especially with the types of clients that are attracted to me. And I've noticed that as I step more into my authenticity, the right clients find me,
Mm,
right? So I'm trying to set those precedents in the beginning that it is a safe place. Please let me know. I always say, like, one of the first things that comes out of my mouth is, I'm a human. I'm gonna screw up. please utilize this as an opportunity to practice calling me out. Hey, Michelle, this is wrong. Or, hey, by the way, right? So I am always constantly giving that feedback to clients and hoping to open that door. And I'm noticing that as I step more into my authenticity, the right clients seem to find me and
Hmm.
attract me. So it's almost a mutual process. It's almost like a magnet is if I step into my authenticity, the right things are going to attract and the wrong things are going to repel, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I love that. That's very interesting. Well, you have a very open, accepting presence about you. You have a very quick smile that certainly puts me at ease, and I'm sure it puts a lot of clients at ease too. And also, I think what you do when you say, I'm human, I'm going to screw up. What that does really, it also shifts that dynamic, right? From the therapist being up here to the client being way down here, it levels the playing field in a sense,
Oh
which
yeah, because
empowers the client.
there's such a power dynamic when you're stepping
Yeah,
into a dynamic for therapy. And I always tell my clients too, like, you are the expert on you. You know yourself better than I ever will, than anybody else ever will. You have the valuable information here. So I might
right.
say something and it might not fit with you. And that's your opportunity to say, yeah, no, or yeah, actually, we need this, right? So
Yeah.
leveling the playing field and decreasing the power dynamics can help in so many ways, especially with other medical professionals. I know a lot of clients struggle with that too, advocating for themselves. So I'm like, let's use this as the practice realm, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So would you say, let me put the question a different way. Who do you work with? Who do you love to work with? And within that, do you have a particular element that you feel like is your zone of genius? Like, I love working in this way, or what?
Yeah. I would say so trauma is my focus mostly, but my main focus is to support folks who are wanting to rewire their subconscious brains. So those who are like maybe they've tried different types of talk therapy before, maybe they've recognized, different patterns, but they still feel very stuck. They're like, these circumstances come up and it's almost like this volcano erupts and I feel like I'm not in control. A lot of the
Hmm.
times that's based on subconscious belief systems, challenges, what have you. So that is what I'm really passionate about is being able to help clients rewire their subconscious brain. And I always talk about when you do that, when your belief system shifts, everything shifts, right? My lens of perception shifts. So maybe nothing changes externally, but I'm waking up, I'm thinking differently, I'm behaving differently, I'm responding differently. I'm not focusing so much here, but I'm focusing more here. So I love to work with clients who maybe have had a little bit of challenge with therapy, to be honest, before and are like, I don't know, this is my last resort. Like, let's do this. And I'm like, okay, I'm up for this. Let's do this together, right?
So, all right, let me interrupt you there for a second.
Yeah.
So, I love that. So, rewiring someone's subconscious beliefs. So, you're talking about if someone gets in these, like, maybe dysfunctional patterns or debilitating patterns, or have limiting belief. How the hell do you do that?
It's a process, right?
I'm sure
Um,
it is,
yeah.
because I
It's
have so many limiting beliefs.
Oh yeah. And we all do, right? We all do. And I always talk about, as long as you're breathing, you get a chance to keep doing it and keep rewiring. So what a privilege for us to be able to connect to that gratitude. It starts with understanding the story, right? It starts with that process of me really understanding how
Story.
did these things come? How did you learn? A lot of times it relates back to safety with trauma. You learn to protect yourself through these responses and now they don't fit, but
Mm.
they're 90% of your brain. They're the most automatic part of ourselves is most of our lives we're on autopilot, right? So I'm
Hmm.
helping you acknowledge that. And then I'm teaching different treatment modalities that may allow you to shift in thinking, whether that's EMDR, memory processing, clinical hypnosis, bringing in positive suggestions based on your treatment needs and practicing those. Or maybe it's doing some IFS work that's deeper and understanding those subconscious connections to the safety or interweaving
Mm.
a lot of these things. I'm very eclectic in my approach based on the client's needs, but that is what I'll be doing is helping them understand it and then rewire it in a process.
Hmm. How did you? I mean, you talked a little bit about uh, your father's impact on you, and what he stood for. Was that the impetus to move in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think my value of understanding people and knowing that there is there is no bad people. There are people who bad things have happened to and they've learned how to survive bad ways. That's truly a
Hmm.
belief of mine. I do not believe that, there's good and bad, or trying to not have attachment to those types of labels. And so I think that that allowed me to look at people who struggle, or people who get into addiction or challenging behavioral responses or have shame around that. Looking at that from a lens of compassion versus a lens of judgment is so imperative for me in the way that I'm looking at people's stories, right?
Mm, I love that. All right, Michelle, how do people learn more about you? First of all, how do you work with clients?
Yeah.
Are you working solely online or what?
Yes, so I'm solely virtual. I am currently licensed in 4 states: Florida, Oklahoma, Oregon, and New Hampshire. So I do individual psychotherapy, intensive therapy, couples therapy, and group therapy, all virtual. If you're interested in learning more about my practice or scheduling a free consult with me, you can visit my website at www.michellesmithlmhc.com, and you can find all the information on my website from there.
Okay. And we'll have all that linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Michelle, awesome. You are very inspiring. I mean, you have this. I don't want to say. You 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 have an essence about you, an aura about you that's very. It is. It's very calming, and I love it. I'd love to have you back at a later date.
Yes, I would love to be back as well. Thank you so much for your
I
time,
hear
Guy.
dogs.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, don't worry about it, please. My dog's here. Don't worry about it. Um, we'll be in touch.
Yes, that sounds wonderful.
All right.
Thank you so
All right.
much. I
Take care.
appreciate
Bye bye.
you. Bye bye.